1959. The 1959 novel, The Manchurian Candidate, by Richard Condon, popularized the notion of military-sponsored mind control. The bestseller, later a movie starring Frank Sinatra, featured a communist plot to brainwash a captured American soldier in Manchuria, programming him to assassinate the U.S. president. The film came out in 1962, but both the film and the book disappeared from mention in the mass media after the Kennedy assassination. Both of the Kennedy assassins are considered by many to be pawns, both Saran and Lee Harvey Oswald, having been subjected to hypnotism. The late 1950s and early 1960s, Theodore Kaczynski, aka the Unibomber, was a volunteer in mind control experiments sponsored by the CIA at Harvard. The overall program was under the control of the late Sidney Gottlieb, head of the CIA's Technical Services Division. 1960, Veterans Administration Hospital in Palo Alto, California. From 1959 on, Dr. Leo Hollister was testing LSD at the Veteran Administration Hospital. Hoping to improve on CIA and military-funded work, Hollister tried drugs out on student volunteers, including a certain Ken Kesey in 1960. Kesey said he was a jock who had only been drunk once before, but on 3 successive Tuesdays he tried different psychedelics. 6 weeks later, I bought my first ounce of grass, Kesey later wrote, adding, quote, 6 months later, I had a job at that hospital as a psychiatric aide. Out of that experience, using drugs while he wrote, Kesey turned out one flew over the cuckoo's nest. He went on to become the counterculture's second most famous LSD visionary, spreading the creed throughout the land, as Tom Wolfe would chronicle in the electric Kool-Aid acid test. June 6, 1961. In a handwritten letter from Aldous Huxley to Timothy Leary, Huxley mentions meeting Dr. Jolly West, a CIA MKUltra operative. Huxley goes on to note that, quote, you are right about the hopelessness of the scientific approach. These idiots want to be Pavlovians, not Lorenzian ethnologists. Pavlov never saw an animal in its natural state, only under duress. The scientific LSD boys do the same with their subjects. No wonder they report psychoses. December 17, 1963, CIA Director Richard Helms writes a 3-page memo, later leaked, that plainly contradicts his earlier assertions that uninformed Americans would never be used as guinea pigs in the drug tests. The memo states that, quote, in the circumstances of potential operational use of this technique, it is virtually certain that the target will be unwitting. Any testing program which does not attempt to approximate this real situation will result in a false sense of accomplishment and readiness, unquote. 1964 to 65, Island of St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. In a series of private experiments, Dr. John Lilly pushed himself into the complete unknown by injecting pure Sandoz LSD into his thigh before climbing into a sensory deprivation tank. When the counterculture sprang up, Lilly became something of a cult figure and served as the inspiration for the films The Day of the Dolphin and Altered States. October 16, 1966, LSD was made illegal in California. 1967, the documentary film Titicut Follies, an expose on the Bridgewater, Massachusetts state prison for the criminally insane, is banned from public screening for the next 25 years for its realistic portrayal of the systemic abuses, including the overuse of tranquilizers, on its patients.
You felt the coffee was poison, you felt people were mixing you up in your thinking, you were shaking.
So, the only part is coffee. And what sort of treatment do I get down there? There are 100 patients who are walking back and forth who are obviously doing me harm. In fact, it's noisy. They've got 2 television sets which are blaring, machines which are going, everything which is against the mind. There's one thing that a patient does need, and this is what I do know absolutely, is quiet. If I have a mental problem or even an emotional problem, Yet I'm thrown in with over 100 of them. All I do is yell, walk around, television's blaring. So that's doing my mind harm.
Are you involved in any sports here?
There are no sports here. All I've got is a baseball and a glove, and that's it. There was nothing else. Back at the other place, I have all the facilities to improve myself. I have the gym, I have the school, I have all kinds of anything I want.
Are you in any group therapy here?
No, there was no group. Obviously, I do not need the group therapy. I need peace and quiet. See, this place is disturbing me. It's harming me. I'm losing weight. Everything that's happening to me is bad. And all I get is, well, why don't you wait? Why don't you take medication? Medication is disagreeable to me. There are people to whom you may not give medication, obviously. And medication I got is hurting me. It's harming me. In fact, to be specific, it harmed my thorax. I do know that much what it's harming. Because if I am in a place, it's as if I were in some kind of a hole or something, right? And if you keep me there, obviously you intend to do me harm. Isn't that perfect logic?
No, it isn't.
It's absolute perfect. I am getting harmed. I say I'm getting harmed. You tell me that until I show some improvement. Yet each time you said until I show some improvement, I have been getting worse. Medication has harmed me.
Thank you, Doctor.
No, I'm in it. Just like that.
He's been much better than this, and he's now falling apart. Now, whether this is some reaction to his medication is certainly something we'll have to look at. However, he was looking a lot more catatonic and depressed before, and sometimes we find that on the antidepressants, you remove the depression and you uncover the paranoid stuff, and we may have to give him larger quantities of tranquilizers just to tone this down. Sort of not looking ready to be able to make it back in
argues
prison.
in a perfect paranoid pattern. If you accept his basic premise, then the rest of it is logical. The basic premise is not true.
1968. After a series of mishaps and some manipulation by the Canadian prison system, a young hippie named Steve Smith is put into the Oak Ridge Hospital for the criminally insane in Midland, Ontario. There he is housed with Canada's worst criminals and forced to undergo constant harassment and drug intervention by his fellow inmates. LSD, methamphetamine, benzodrine, and the near-death experience scopolamine were all administered by the patients as defense disruption therapy. The experiments continued during the 1970s. In 1968, LSD possession was declared a misdemeanor and sale a felony in the United States. In 1969, LSD outlawed in Canada. August 2nd, 1977, New York Times. Quote, drugs tested by CIA on mental patients, unquote. The Ewan Cameron story is finally told in the world's most important newspaper. 1978, Jonestown, Guyana. Recent journalism hints that the 900 black North American suicides in Jonestown may have been a CIA operation. Many of the lethal drugs used in the scene were the same ones tested under MK-Ultra. Apparently, Jim Jones and one of his aides had CIA connections. The father of Jonestown leader Larry Layden was head of the chemical and biological weapons research at the Army's Dugway Proving Grounds in the 1950s and contributed $25,000 to the People's Temple. According to the researcher, quote, public exposure of experiments in U.S. prisons and mental institutions was, in all likelihood, a major impetus for relocating this testing to the jungles of a virtually unknown country. The story of the CIA and their experiments with mind-control drugs is not over. Mind control, both overt and covert, is still very much with us. Current structural controls, such as booze, pills, television, and materialism, can only keep people distracted as long as these controls themselves remain amusing, hardly a certainty. It stands to reason that the search for the perfect mind control drug continues. As one researcher put it, they have more money to experiment with these days. With the remake of The Manchurian Candidate film set for the fall of 2004, the debate over mind control is also still very much with us.
You might have heard